Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, my friends, to the Medlock Post Radio Show, and I'm your host, Richard G. Medlock. This is the all-American program where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower, and where we stand for the red, white, and blue. This is the 11th of April, 2023, and episode 134, Rulers, Law, or Tyranny. That's right. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post Radio Show are those of the host and anybody else who joins in, and they are not necessarily the views and opinions of Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. The Medlock Post Radio Show is brought to you by the United States Constitution. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're brought to you by the United States Constitution. The last few episodes, we have been basically connecting a lot of dots. And from the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, to the outbreak of Marxism, to a lot of things that are taking place, what's happening to the banking industry, which is not good, what's going on the global front with the globalists and their push to take over the world, the attack on the American dollar, and the Trilateral Commission declaring 2023 year one of the new world order. And last episode, we talked about the Bilderberg Group, and we're going to continue that conversation today, but we have a few other things to get out of the way first. Yesterday, April 10th, 1970, is when the Beatles broke up. Shockwaves around the world when that was announced. Maybe not totally unexpected, but shockwaves. And I made the comment, what was their last big hit? And off the top of my head, I said, probably Let It Be. Well, I was close. Okay. I was really, if it's horseshoes, I would have been okay. Or if it was darts, I would have been in great shape. That's how close it was. But it wasn't Let It Be. However, their last album, released a month after they broke up in 1970, released May 8th in 1970, was the Let It Be album. And, of course, they came out with a movie, too. Let It Be, the song, was recorded a year earlier in January or February of 1969. It didn't release until later on. And it was on the Abbey Road album along with Get Back, the song Get Back. Now, all you Beatles fans know exactly what I'm talking about here. Now, their last song, here's a trivia question for you. What was the last song they did? What was the last song they recorded? Now, I would have totally failed this answer because I guess I had never paid any attention to this. Their last song they recorded together as a group in Apple Studios in London, England, was called The End. And it was on their 1969 album Abbey Road. It was composed by Paul McCartney and credited to Lennon McCartney. It was the last song recorded collectively by all four Beatles. And it's the final song of the medley that constitutes the majority of side 2 of the Abbey Road album. All right, a little history here. However, we're not through with some Beatles information here. Let It Be did hit number 1. However, their last number 1 hit, June 13th, 1970, was A Long and Winding Road. Their last number 1 hit. And I remember that. It's a beautiful song. But that was their last number 1 hit. That was their 20th and final number 1 hit. Let It Be was the one before that. So a little bit of history. There's one more thing. What was their number 1 single? All-time number 1 single. Now, I'm sure you Beatles fans, right? Your mind is just going, right? How many of you said, Hey Jude, or Let It Be, or Here Comes the Sun? But you got to go all the way back to the beginning of the Beatles. Their number 1 biggest selling, certified selling single was She Loves You. Yeah. Okay. She Loves You is still their number 1 single. Now, I would have said, I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was from the same album. So I told you I was going to look all this stuff up. I try not to fail my listeners. Big announcement this morning, folks, on the business front. How many of you ever went to a Tupperware party at someone's home? Now, granted, it was mostly for the ladies. My wife went to a few. We have Tupperware all over the place. Still use it today. It's great stuff. I mean, we've had stuff ever since we've been married, and we'll be married 49 years in June. So we've got stuff that old or older. But Tupperware has announced this morning that they will probably close their doors after 70 years. So nobody wants their stuff. They said the younger generation, they don't buy this stuff. They're hooked on fast foods and frozen stuff. And there's nothing left over afterwards. You throw it all away. If you don't eat it all, that's what they do. They just throw it away. All right, a little bit of trivia there. C.S. Lewis, I need to pop back into this one screen. C.S. Lewis said this: one of the most cowardly things ordinary people do is shut their eyes to facts. I'm going to let that sink in, folks. Cowardly things ordinary people do is shut their eyes to facts. People just stick their head in the sand and just move on. After the show yesterday, I got an email from Mike. He's part of a big group that we exchange emails and information, and we have some very interesting discussions. People in this group do not hold back their feelings, especially when it comes to what's happening to this country. But he sent me this email yesterday about the show yesterday. Add all of the other attack vectors the left is bringing in full force, and you have the ultimate rhetorical question of the age. Anyone with common sense, integrity, honesty, and an ability to tell right from wrong already knows the answer. And I understand that a sizable portion of the millennial population and nearly all of the Gen Z have succumbed to their indoctrination of the past 25 to 30 years. But for the life of me, I cannot fathom the legacy Dems of the boomer generation being this ignorant. What can they possibly be drinking and or eating to be missing the obvious boat in the water? With the indoctrination, I can see Gen Z as they perhaps feel they can continue to live rent-free later in life by forcing our illegals to work 3 jobs to support them. And then he goes on and mentions the CEO of J.P. Morgan, which I talked about yesterday. And he says, I forwarded a Fox article a few days ago, which he did, and I posted on my Facebook pages and Twitter and so forth, regarding the CEO of J.P. Morgan, with the caution about that type of thinking being the tinder for the lighting of civil fire. How much more are we willing? And that's a great question, Mike. How much more are we as patriots, lovers of the Constitution, lovers of God, lovers of our family, lovers of the rule of law, how much more are we going to take? And that's a question that you yourself and your family need to come to and answer. It's a discussion at the dinner table. John Adams gave us this. I fear that in every elected office, members will obtain an influence by noise, not sense, by meanness, not greatness, by ignorance, not learning, by contracted hearts, not large hearts or large souls. There must be decency and respect. John Adams just described what is happening today. All the Democrats do is scream and yell. We saw AOC do that over the weekend about the abortion pill, which is being halted because of the safety of the pill. Not because of what it does, but because of the bad side effects. And they want the FDA to go back and look at it to make sure there's 2 pills. They're showing they're not safe. The side effects are even killing women. We've talked a lot about the CBDC, digital currency, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, which is part of the Bilderberg Group and works with Council of Foreign Affairs and the Trilateral Commission and the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, announced yesterday they unveiled their unicorn, UNICOIN, a global legal tender settlement CBDC. During last week's International Monetary Fund spring meetings of 2023, the Digital Currency Monetary Authority announced the launch of an international central bank digital currency known as the Universal Monetary Unit, which is symbolized by the ANSI character. It's a U with two dots over the U. According to a press release announcing the new currency, UMU, Universal Monetary Unit, also known as Unicorn, as a legal money commodity that can transact in any legal tender settlement currency and functions like a CBDC to enforce banking regulations and protect the financial integrity of the international banking system. And I have beachfront property for you in Arizona. That's right, George Strait song. That goes along with the Federal Reserve's Fed Now and their Fed coin. Now, they came out the last couple of days and said, oh, Fed Now is not a digital currency. But then the next day, the IMF comes out with their international digital currency. And then the Fed comes out and announces their Fed coin. In January, Joe Biden told us that digital currency, we're not going there. No, it's not for us. We can't believe what they are telling us. We can't.
I am the nation. I was born on July 4th, 1776, and the Declaration of Independence is my birth certificate. The bloodlines of the world run in my veins because I offered freedom to the oppressed. I am many things and many people. I am the nation. I am 200 million living souls and the ghost of millions who have lived and died for me. I'm Nathan Hale and Paul Revere. I stood at Lexington and fired the shot heard round the world. I'm Washington, Jefferson, Patrick Henry. I'm John Paul Jones, the Green Mountain Boys, and Davy Crockett. I'm Lee, Grant, and Abe Lincoln. I remember the Alamo, the Maine, and Pearl Harbor. When freedom called, I answered and stayed until it was over there. I left my heroic dead in Flanders fields and on the rock of Corregidor, on the bleak slopes of Korea, and in the steaming jungles of Vietnam. I am the Brooklyn Bridge, the wheatlands of Kansas, and the granite hills of Vermont. I am the coal fields of the Virginias and Pennsylvania, the fertile lands of the West, the Golden Gate and Grand Canyon. I am Independence Hall, the Monitor. I am the Merrimack. I'm big. I sprawl from the Atlantic to the Pacific. My arms reach out to embrace Hawaii and Alaska. 3 million square miles. I'm more than 3 million farms. I'm forest, field, mountain, desert. I'm quiet villages, and I'm cities that never sleep. You can look at me and see Ben Franklin walking down the streets of Philadelphia with his bread loaf under his arm. You can see Betsy Ross with her needle. You can see the lights of Christmas and hear the strains of Auld Lang Syne as the calendar turns again.
I am the nation. Johnny Cash. As I listened to it this time, I've listened to it many times, I'm thinking, how many of our millennials and Gen Zs recognized a bunch of names and places? Did they even recognize them? Do they know what they are? That's sad. Ruler's law or tyranny. James Madison said, the people are the only legitimate fountain of power. We the people. You know what? That's my pronoun. We the people. We the people. John Jay, those who own the country ought to govern it. That's us, we the people. James Madison, again, the essence of government is power, and power, lodged as it must be in human hands, will never be liable to abuse. Will ever be liable to abuse. And we are watching massive abuse today. Ruler's law. Government is defined in the dictionary as a system of ruling or controlling. And therefore, the American founders measured political systems in terms of the amount of coercive power or systematic control which a particular system or government exercises over its people. In other words, the yardstick is not political parties, but political power. There is a big difference there. We can see that today. The political party that is in power today is exercising tyranny. That's their power today. Now, using this type of yardstick, the American founders considered the two extremes to be anarchy on one hand and tyranny on the other. At the one extreme of anarchy, there is no government, no law, no systematic control, and no governmental power. While at the other extreme, there is too much control, too much political oppression, and too much government. Or, as the founders called it, tyranny. Tyranny. Now, in America today, we have tyranny coming from our government, and we have anarchy in the streets. And he said, what do you mean anarchy in the streets? Anarchy with the Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and other organizations that are out there attacking churches, pro-life facilities, cities. Portland is done as a city. I mean, everybody's shutting down. Restaurants, corporations, they're gone. Crime and drugs is so bad, they can't stay there anymore. It's not worth it. Plus, they can't find anybody to come to work in those areas. That's anarchy. There's no law there. It's the law of the jungle. Survival of the fittest. Now, the object of the founders was to discover the balanced center between these two extremes. They recognized that under the chaotic confusion of anarchy, there is no law, whereas at the other extreme, the law is totally dominated by the ruling power and is therefore ruler's law. What they wanted to establish was a system of people's law. People's law, we the people, where the government is kept under the control of the people and political power is maintained at the balanced center with enough government to maintain security, justice, and good order, but not enough government to abuse the people. Rulers know that fixed law governs even the king. Fixed law governs even the king. Therefore, a ruler must prevent and destroy written laws, constitutions, charters, or corpus juris, body of laws, that would interfere with his complete power and control. This is what the democratic Marxists are doing. They've complained for years and years and years that the Constitution limits them what they can do. Is supposed to. Ruler's law has been the default form of government for billions of people for thousands of years. The Founding Fathers identified 10 major elements of ruler's law that were being wielded like a bludgeon in the hands of King George and his monarchical administration. Now, are these being done today? Bully tactics. Authority under ruler's law is nearly always put in place by force, violence, and conquest. Are we being bullied by the Democratic Marxists in America? You bet your bippy we are. At every turn. They're using DEI and ESG, environmental, socialist, or social and governance, to rate corporations whether they can borrow money or whatever. And DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, we're throwing out this stuff about Budweiser. Why did Budweiser turn to the transgenders to do their marketing? And they're taking a lot of flack on this. It's because of ESG and DEI. They don't want to get bankrupt by the government coming in and fining them. Some companies have been fined up to $75 million for not following these rules. So Budweiser's trying to play this game. They're being bullied into doing this. Maybe we should feel sorry for Budweiser. Maybe not. Maybe if these corporations would stand up to this bullying being done by the government, it would stop. All sovereign power is considered to be in the hands of the conquerors or their descendants. Now, we don't have that here, but the Democratic Marxists are trying to conquer this nation for themselves and the globalists. Classes. The people are not treated equally. But wait a minute. We're told we should have equity. That is not equality, folks. It's two different things. The people are not treated equally, but are divided into classes and are looked upon as subjects of the king. Look at the justice system today. There is no law in the justice system when you have a two-tiered system. These people over here can get away with whatever they want to, while these people over here, we're going to punish them to the extent of the law. No private property. The entire country is considered to be the property of the ruler who speaks of it as his realm. Isn't that what J.P. Morgan said the other day? The government ought to be taking our property away so we can control the climate crisis? Powerless citizens. The thrust of government power is from the top down, not from the people, we the people, upward. And it shouldn't even be upward, it should be sideways. They should be working with us, standing beside us, carrying out the rule of law. No rights. The people have no unalienable rights. The king giveth and the king taketh away. And that is what they're trying to achieve in America today. Arbitrary law. Government is by the whims of the king, not by the fixed rule of law. Rulers know that fixed law governs even the king. I read this earlier. Therefore, a ruler must prevent and destroy written laws, constitutions, charters, or corpus juris, body of laws, that would interfere with his complete power and control. What did AOC and others in the Democratic Marxist Party scream all weekend? Disobey this federal judge's order. It was a temporary order to take a look at the facts. And they've gone bonkers over it. Take a breath and sit back and let the system do its job, right? So what you're saying about Trump, well, let's it should be good for you. Let the system do its job. Let the course of justice play out. But no, not for them, only their enemies. Legislative control. The ruler issues edicts, or in this case, executive orders that are called the law, and interprets the law however it best suits the ruler's ultimate goals. I got a pen and I got a phone, Obama said. And Biden's doing the same thing, adding new masters. Problems are solved by issuing more edicts or laws, setting up more bureaus, creating more regulatory agencies, swamping the people with a flood of regulations, and charging the people for these services by continually adding new taxes. Now, we can point that to both parties in power. They're overwhelming the system. They've overwhelmed the welfare system. They've overwhelmed the southern border. They've overwhelmed drug use in this country. They've overwhelmed the law enforcement to try to keep up with all of this. They've overwhelmed the military, and they're overwhelming the banking system right now. This is where we are in America. Rejecting freedom. Freedom is never entertained as a solution. Understand that. Freedom is never entertained as a solution. Look at what's happening out of Washington, D.C. today. Do you hear the word freedom or liberties, owning more property, or tax relief, or freedom of speech, or freedom of religion? No, it is just the opposite. Freedom is never entertained as a solution. More regulations, more tightening, less liberty. Rulers are afraid of the people. They're afraid the people will take away their power. The rulers do what they can to make the people weak and fully dependent on the government for everything. The welfare system created by FDR was to reach this purpose. Create these people. There are generations of families that have been on this system, and they're not looking to get off. They don't have to. And then I'm going to add one more here. I'm going to add my own to this. Totalitarianism. The long history of rulers' law is one of blood and terror, both anciently and in modern times. Blood and terror. Look at Germany, Russia, China, Vietnam, on and on. These rulers that brought in communism took away their guns and killed hundreds of millions of people because they would not roll over and obey. Under it, the people, under rulers' law, people are stratified into an aristocracy of the ruler's retinue, while the lot of the common people is one of perpetual poverty, excessive taxation, stringent regulations, and a continuous existence of misery. Really? So let's go back and look at the Bilderberg Group and what they want to accomplish. Let's go back and look at their objectives. Their grand design is a one world government or world company with a single global marketplace, policed by one world army, and financially regulated by one world central bank using one global currency. Their wish list include one international identifying one set of universal values. Well, who sets these values? Those in power. Centralized control of world populations by mind control, in other words, controlling world public opinion. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. You don't think that's been going on? I'll give you some stuff in a little bit. A new world order with no middle class, only rulers and servants, and of course, no democracy. A zero growth society without prosperity or progress, only greater wealth and power for the rulers. What did this say? Under it, the people are stratified into an aristocracy of the ruler's retinue, while the lot of the common people is one of perpetual poverty, excessive taxation, stringent regulations, and a continuous existence of misery. Manufactured crisis and perpetual war. Absolute control of education to program the public mind and train those chosen for various roles. A global welfare state where obedient slaves will be rewarded and nonconformists targeted for extermination. Is that what you want, folks? I don't. I want freedom. I want freedom. Where's that quote by Abraham Lincoln? Where'd I put you? Excuse me, Benjamin Franklin. Did I not put that in here? I didn't. I was going to save it for another day. Works today. He said, without freedom of thought, I'm paraphrasing, we cannot have freedom. And without freedom, we cannot have freedom of speech. The globalists want to take away even our freedom of thought. You've heard me talk about that, where people have given that away. They fall into the sound bites of the media and the Democratic Marxists, and it just, oh, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, let's do away with assault weapons. Let's do away with rocks, and let's do away with knives, and let's do away with fingernail clippers. Let's do that. Let's give away our freedom. Nobody cares, because we're thinking with our emotions, not, as Mike said, common sense and intelligence. So we have the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, the Group of 20, the World Bank, the European Union, the Federal Reserve, NATO, BRICS, the organization with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, plus Trump was removing the United States from all of this. He knew what was happening. He announced in April of 2015, I will not let globalists take over America. And he started withdrawing. He wanted to remove, he did, all funding from the World Health Organization from America. One of the first things that Biden did, like on day one, is restored all that. put us back in there and gave them more money. Trump wanted to pull out of all these things, except NATO, and he wanted to straighten up the Federal Reserve, and he wanted to control China and all this stuff. And what do we get now? Just corruption and power plays. April 11th, 2023. And Medlock's fired up because my freedom is trying to be taken away, and I don't like it. Richard Salent was president of CBS News from 1961 to 1964, and then again from 1966 to 1979. Explained the major media's role. Our job is to give people not what they want, but what we decide they ought to have. They decide. We saw this happening as I was growing up. And they used the Vietnam War to springboard this. They did. That's a whole another episode talking about the 60s and what went on there. And those radicals that were taking over universities and streets and everything and protesting and getting into the free love and drugs and all that good stuff, they're the ones running the country today. The John Kerrys and the Clintons and Feinstein and all those people. And Schumer and Pelosi and all of that. CBS and other media giants control everything we see, hear, and read through television, radio, newspapers, magazines, books, films, and large portions of the internet. And on apps today, officials and some journalists attend Bilderberg meetings on condition they report nothing. But they're given their marching orders at these Bilderberg meetings. And yes, there's one scheduled for this year, I think in May or June. They had one last year. Yes. But they're low-key, folks. The World Economic Forum is their public face. The Rockefeller family wields enormous power, even though its reigning patriarch, David, has passed away. And surely near the end of his dominance. Heck, no. However, for years, the Rockefellers, led by David, gained great influence over the media. With it, the family gained sway over public opinion. With the pulse on public opinion, they gained deep influence in politics. And with this politics of subtle corruption, they are taking control of the nation and now aim for total world domination. Remember, Rockefeller helped found Bilderberg Group. He helped found the Trilateral Commission, and he helped found the Council of Foreign Relations. The Bilderberg-Rockefeller scheme is to make their views so appealing by camouflaging them that they become public policy and can pressure world leaders into submitting to the needs of the masters of the universe. The free world press is their instrument to disseminate agreed upon propaganda. Look what they're pushing, folks. We talk about this over and over. CRT, DEI, ESG, all of this stuff, transgenderism. We have this shooting in Nashville 2 weeks ago, and the media supports who? The shooter. Oh, he was a victim. These Christians made him a victim. Yesterday, there was a shooting in Louisville, Kentucky, at a bank. It was a bank employee, or former. He was told the day before or something that he was being let go. Well, I'm not sure. He was in the woke crowd. I'm not sure how yet. he gets fired. Does he not know that banks are letting people off daily around the nation? Major corporations are letting people off. Firings right now are at a record high for this year. So he gets let go. So he thinks, hey, I'm a victim here because I'm a whatever it is. So he goes out and murders people. Oh, I'm a victim. I don't have to take this. I remember every time I let a black person go that worked for me, they screamed racism right back into my face. Had nothing to do with the color of their skin. They weren't doing the job. If it had to do with the color of their skin, if I was a real racist, they'd have never got hired, right? Think about that, folks. Common sense. In 1942, let me go back to this. A new world order was planned before 1942. The UN began with a group of CFR members called the Informal Agenda Group. They drafted the original UN proposal, presented it to Franklin Roosevelt, who announced it publicly the next day. And at its 1945 founding, CFR members comprised over 40 of the U.S. delegates. See how all of this just has taken place? Are the dots starting to connect for you out there? Let's see. Let me skip down here because we only have like 11 minutes left. Let's jump down to programming the public mind. Hadley Cantrell, in his 1970 book, The Human Dimension Experiences in Policy Research, government psycho-political operations are propaganda campaigns designed to create perpetual tensions and to manipulate different groups of people to accept the particular climate of opinion the CFR seeks to achieve in the world. The book was written in 1967. And we have witnessed that. We used to call it divide and conquer. The politicians want to divide and conquer the groups. It's easier to conquer them that way. Let's get this group over here, create them as, help them understand, oh, you're a victim, then they've got control of you. You're going to be offended at everything you hear about your group, whether it's race or gender or whatever. And you're going to be offended. And when they're offended, they are controlled by an outside force. Ken Adachi wrote, what most Americans believe to be public opinion is in reality carefully crafted and scripted propaganda designed to elicit a desired behavioral response from the public. Pavlov's dog. You're hungry, ring the bell. You get fed. They've developed this web of control. Now, David Rockefeller wrote his memoirs. I read this the other day, but I'm going to read it again. This is on page 405 of his memoirs. Some even believe we are part, he's talking about the Rockefeller family. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it. And he called himself an American. when he was in fact a globalist, setting out to tear down America. In 1973, a new international economic order was organized and headquartered in Washington, D.C. Powerful U.S., European Union, and East Asian members seek its operative funding goal. Dots, ladies and gentlemen, dots. Holly Shklar, who's he with? Got to go back to the previous page. In her book, Trilateralism, the Trilateral Commission and Elite Planning for World Management, Holly Sklar wrote, powerful figures in America, Europe, and East Asia let the rich safeguard the interest of Western capitalism in an explosive world, probably by discouraging protectionism, rationalism, or nationalism, or any response that would pit the elites of one against the elites of another in their common quest for global dominance. Trilateralists, Zbigniew Brzezinski, one of Trilateral Commission's co-founders, wrote in his Between Two Ages, Americans' Role in the Technotronic Era, people, governments, and economies of all nations must serve the needs of multinational banks and corporations. The Constitution is inadequate. The old framework of international politics, with their sphere of influence, the fiction of sovereignty, is clearly no longer compatible with reality. Their reality, folks, not America's reality. They want America dead. They want Americans, you and I, we the people, as their servants, answering to their beck and call and bowing to their altar of worship. I will not bow. So today they've added Argentina, Ukraine, Israel, Jordan, Brazil, Turkey, China, and Russia. We can add India, South Africa, and some other country. Chile is in there. They're establishing public policy objectives to be implemented by governments worldwide. Trilateralists have rejected the U.S. Constitution and the democratic process. In fact, Trilateral Commission was established to counter a crisis in democracy, too much of it that had to be contained. Folks, they don't like freedom. They need to contain freedom. Because when people are free, they can't control us. That's the bottom line here. Now, we talked about the North American Union. And what that George Bush set up in 2005. The Biden administration is trying to kick that back in. They're calling it something else now. Right off the top of my head, I can't remember it. But everything you see the Biden administration do is to destroy our freedom, to take away the opportunity for us to control our own lives. I, for one, am not going to give in to this. I don't like it. I don't. Whoa. James Madison taught us the Constitution preserves the advantage of being armed with which Americans possess with the people of almost every other nation where the governments are afraid to trust the people with arms. The best form of government is that which is most likely to prevent the greatest sum of evil. James Monroe. Our government is pushing evil down our throats. James Monroe again said, our country may be likened to a new house. We lack many things, but we possess the most precious of all, liberty. Liberty, folks. All right, this has been a day. We're in a war, folks. And it's not going anywhere. This is going to be the last man standing? I don't, but we're in a war. A psychological, political, ideological war with a group of men and women who want to control everything about our life. And they cannot do this on a worldwide basis without destroying America, destroying our Constitution. I read to you how much they hate the Constitution. It's in their way because it gives us freedom to do what we want to do. We, the people, are the power. We, the people. Folks, let me go back to that quote. Our quotes. James Madison, the people are the only legitimate fountain of power. John Jay, those who own the country ought to govern it. We, the people, we are the ones that are in control, and we should be acting like it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a Medlock Post radio show for today, April 11th, 2023, brought to you by the United States Constitution. May God bless America.